Welcome to Inside View. I am your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on today's show is Cory Burnell, who is a financial advisor in the Valley Springs area. Cory, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Joel.
Great to have you back on the show. You know, we've had a lot of interesting topics over the years, all kinds of different things that we've talked about, and we're going to hit a couple different interesting topics today. We'll talk about the asphalt plant that's proposed for the Valley Springs area, and then get into the Republican primary, which should be a fun conversation. And then definitely want to talk a little bit about your area of expertise with financial advising and what's going on nationally, globally a little bit, and a couple other good topics. But before we get into all that, for those who don't know you, how did you find yourself in Calaveras County?
Well, my wife was born and raised here, so we moved back here after grad school in 2004. I was looking for a new position anyway, and she wanted to be back home with all the good people here in Calaveras County, and I said yes.
So what do you like about living here, raising a family?
We love living in the country. We love the small town atmosphere. You know, everywhere we go, we know people, and they know us, and people can keep an eye on my kids for me, which is helpful.
It's nice. It feels pretty safe for the most part around here. When you're not in the office slaving away, what are some things you enjoy in terms of hobbies?
Well, we just spent Sunday up at the Moke River, Box Beach, up Electra Road. So we do that quite often, sometimes out on the lake. And of course, in the wintertime, the mountains are nearby, so we do some skiing and snowboarding kind of thing. But golf, La Quintana, my office is right next to the 10th Green Inn, so I'll jet over there in an afternoon if things are kind of light.
How's the course looking right now? Is it brown? Or?
You know, it's surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. I'm impressed. A lot better than the Vets Memorial softball fields.
Well, good. I'm glad the balls aren't just disintegrating the grass when they hit or anything like that. So what was it that got you into your current trade? Was it a long-time dream, or was it something that you kind of figured out about yourself over time?
I started as a financial advisor right out of undergrad at UC Santa Barbara. My major was economics and mathematics, and so that was 1999. Realized I didn't know what the heck I was doing, so I thought, well, what's this thing they call an MBA? And so in 2002, I started that in East Texas, and we finished that up in 2004 and moved back here and went right back into the advisory business with investments. So along the years, though, I've learned how to do it right.
And have you found that this is kind of a good base to operate out of? I mean, with today's technology, it seems like you can almost be anywhere and you can have clients.
That's the case. I have clients all over the country. I think I'm licensed in like 12 different states now, something like that. And I have two partners. We have an office in San Ramon as well, and our principal office is in San Diego, where my third partner's at.
All right. So are things going well for you? The business is growing?
Very well. I mean, returns this year have been fantastic for client accounts, and we continue to get referrals. We principally generate new business off of referrals.
Right on. Yeah. Right on. Well, I'm glad to hear a success story in Calaveras County. Yeah. And we're not going to go too much into the local economy, but I did want to share with people that looks like our unemployment rate is down in the 6.2% neighborhood, down from the teens. I think even just a few years back we were looking a lot worse. So not as bad as it once was. It's really good to hear. And one of the things we're going to delve into here is a local business that's looking to get started, and that's an asphalt plant that was proposed by Ford Construction. And if you could just kind of give a little recap of kind of how you heard about this and what your thoughts are on what's going on.
Well, I've heard about it playing golf at La Quintana. It came up, one of the men's club tournaments, and guys were complaining about it, and I was outnumbered, so I wisely kept my mouth shut because people were roundly opposed to it. But in the back of my mind, I had to fall back on kind of the principle of freedom and ask myself the question, is this a legitimate use, and is the business potentially going to be denied use of their own property, and essentially have some value taken from them by people preventing their free use of their resources. So I've investigated it since then, and I do think that is the case. I understand people's concerns, but I tend to believe we ought to, as Americans, err on the side of defense of freedom, whether it be the way somebody else is using their freedom we might not like, but in the hopes that they'll come to our defense when our freedom's at risk too.
And yet it seems to be the unpopular opinion in the area. And just to give people kind of some context, New Hogan Reservoir has a dam that holds the water back, and right below that there's the Calaveras River that is released through a power turbine. And then very near that release point is a quarry right now, which produces some rock products. And the proposed plant would be going in that quarry area, which is already industrially zoned and has already been operating in an industrial manner. And then another component is just downstream from the quarry is the intake for the Calaveras County Water District water treatment plant, which serves the area with potable water. And then there are neighborhoods which aren't that far away. And so what are some of the concerns you've heard from folks who live in the area about what the impact might be to them?
Yeah, they were concerned about sound, odor, and traffic principally. And I think to a reasonable extent concerned about the environmental impact, though I think that oftentimes is kind of a fallback for getting for using to get where they want to, despite that not really being the concern. I think the concerns really are more odor and noise and traffic. Now, looking there, hey, there's not all that much traffic there on Hogan Dam or on Silver Rapids. Not to mention the quarry already has trucks going in and out of there. Not going to be that many more trucks as a result of the asphalt plant. As far as the odor goes, the company has a bag of some sort that, while the machine's in operation, contains the odor, and they only cook up the asphalt for that day's batch or use. So it's not like this thing's running 24/7 or something. The idea of noise, they have a rock crusher out there that's louder than this asphalt addition's going to be. So those I understand people having those concerns, but it appears that they're being mitigated and that they're really not all that dangerous of concerns or real. But the environmental impact, certainly we should be concerned about. And as I understand, the Water District has come to an agreement with the plant about regulations that will protect our water supply. And then, of course, there's clean air concerns. So I don't think anybody's opposed to reasonable regulations and them complying with that. But there's existing law there that will rule the day. I mean, in fact, environmental regulations are already so stringent, it's very hard to do business. So I think we can count on the fact that existing law will handle those issues. But there's no existing law about the traffic or the noise or the odor, and I think this is people trying. If those are the concerns, what you're doing is changing the rules after the game's already played, and this business has been deemed zoned by unanimous decision by the planning department that they're zoned and approved for that use.
So there was an appeal which was by My Valley Springs, which was denied unanimously by the Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. But then there were also some determinations about some CEQA reviews and air quality by the Environmental Health Department. Mm-hmm. One of those was overturned by the Planning Commission, one was upheld, and now Ford Construction has appealed that. And so this is all going to kind of come to a head in front of the Board of Supervisors is what it sounds like.
Right.
And so we'll see that board weigh the evidence on both sides and then make a determination to move forward. So it could be very interesting to see if the process works well, and it sounds like there'll be some unhappy people either way. There
will be, and I'm hoping none of my clients who are watching this are on the other side.
You used an analogy of maybe a more simple example of why you think it's important to let people do what they want to do, whether you like it or not, and it had to do with a rooster. So.
Yes. A couple years ago, some new neighbors moved in on the house on the corner, and they brought a rooster with them. Now, we have hens, and I'm all for chickens, but hens very quietly lay their eggs. Roosters, not so much. And now, if I wanted to live in a neighborhood where I could be protected from a neighbor moving in next door with a rooster, there are plenty of neighborhoods I could choose to live in. Gold Creek, for example, I have an HOA. I'm pretty sure you can't have a rooster there. Okay, so that would have been an opportunity for me. Similar situation for those living in the neighborhoods near this quarry. It's been there a long, long time. A lot of people who've moved there, understand that it's there. And the real lesson here is that when making a real estate purchasing decision, we need to be informed and not ignorant of all of the things around us that may possibly happen. And if we want to protect ourselves from that, there are very good ways to do that through voluntary contractual arrangements like homeowners associations and such.
If this gets shut down, what could that potentially mean for the future?
I don't think it means a whole lot for our economy. However, it's just a bad precedent that we can see really right all the way across the country of, Americans really, if they squawk loud enough, they can kind of impede the rule of law. And that's unfortunate. I mean, we see it right up all the way through the White House, where politics reigns rather than the rule of law.
Got it. Speaking of politics, wanted to jump into what has become a very interesting Republican race. The presidential race still seems like it's a long ways away, but we are definitely going. Many candidates have announced on the Republican side, a couple on the Democratic side as well. But let's talk a little bit about the Republican primary and what's the kind of the biggest issue? What are the headlines right now with that race?
Yeah, well, of course, the Trump effect, right? I mean, he's really making waves. But I think what's so interesting about Trump is that people actually believe when he says something, people believe he means it. You actually don't. Nobody thinks Trump is lying to them on these issues, and sometimes it's quite shocking is the way in which he phrases his opinions. But I think that he's kind of striking a chord with people, and that you see what you get with that guy. Conversely, a poll just out today by Quinnipiac University or something polled Hillary Clinton versus some other major Republican candidates in Colorado, Iowa, and Virginia. And what was really interesting, she lost in all three polls pretty handily, but in all three states. But what was really interesting is in Colorado, 62% of the respondents said she's not trustworthy or honest. And I think that really is what's striking a chord with people with Trump. You might not like what he says, but hey, you got to believe he means it,
Do you think that those Hillary numbers are in large part due to the big email scandal that happened recently, or is there even more to it than that?
Yeah, the email and all the way back to Benghazi and the idea of a cover-up there. And this nonsense of the personal email and, well, she didn't want to carry two devices. Now, I don't know what the federal government requires them to carry, but hey, I can have dozens, if not hundreds of email accounts on my one Android phone. So I don't have to have two devices to have two emails. So even this, she's just not credible. I mean, I think that's where that poll, with the opinion that poll out of Colorado is reflecting, 62% say she's not trustworthy or honest, So I think the candidates who seem to restore that, and we've been seeing an administration in Washington that's been not transparent, and constantly covering up. I mean, the IRS and Fast and Furious with the guns and the VA benefits problem. So I think the country's about just kind of weary of a lack of trust.
Now, many people almost say, well, Hillary's a shoo-in, she's going to take this election. Do you think that there's any truth to that, or do you absolutely think that it's the contrary?
She'll definitely get the Democratic nomination. I mean, when you have a socialist, an avowed socialist like Bernie Sanders getting headlines, out of Vermont, it's kind of like, all right, the media is really fishing for some credible alternative to her in the Democratic Party, and there isn't one. But no, I think that her baggage and the lack of trust in that arena, I don't think she will win. And I think the Republican field is putting out some candidates that do have credibility on issues like Scott Walker, who actually get things done and fix things. Chris Christie actually fixes things in New Jersey, And then you have other honest candidates like Ben Carson. I mean, the man's character is so impeccable, it's up there with George Washington. You can't possibly say something bad about Ben Carson. If you do, you're a wicked, evil person. He is just a kind man full of goodness. So, there's some people in the Republican field that are very interesting contrasts to Mrs. Clinton.
But let's say with Ben Carson, does he have the experience that it takes to be commander-in-chief, even if he has impeccable integrity? Right. What are your thoughts on that?
I think oftentimes there's too much weight or import put on those types of managerial credentials, because, you know, look at the president has input from a massive team, and there's only one branch of government. So you also have the courts and you have Congress. I mean, the federal government is supposed to move slowly so that it moves prudently. And so long as you have a man with intelligence and integrity and good advisors, the system works.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we have so many Republican candidates. I don't know if I've ever seen this many this early.
Yeah.
What's behind so many people?
I think a lot of these, if you look down the names on the list, I think a lot of them are getting a bit late in their careers, and they're finding out, hey, if a Republican wins, they could be another 8 years out from another shot, and that's a long time in the political arena for your star to fade or another star to come up. So I think there's kind of a grasping at straws going on there. It's a bit silly, some of the names I see. I mean, Lindsey Graham. I mean, this guy is a sidekick for John McCain. He's not a front-runner candidate. There's no possibility. I mean, it's embarrassing that he would even throw his name in the hat. It's like self-delusion or something.
Okay, and which I suppose could be said for more than just him.
Yeah, there's plenty of them. Hey, maybe I'll run.
If there were to be a candidate or two that has true potential to take that nomination and then go all the way, who's standing out to you right now?
Yeah, I think Scott Walker is a front runner. Obviously, Jeb Bush is going to raise the most money, and he's the best connected. I think he's going to have trouble getting the Republican nomination because what we saw in the midterms in 2014 is a guttural reaction to what's been going on in Washington the last few years. And now you have these two Supreme Court rulings, one on marriage and one on federal subsidies for Obamacare. I think that's really going to activate a more conservative sleeping giant in the Republican Party. And so I don't know that Jeb Bush will appeal well with them. What's interesting about the primary, you know, in Iowa and New Hampshire and then South Carolina is it does afford that type of grassroots organization that goes on there, does afford the lesser recognized candidates like Ben Carson or a Rand Paul or a Marco Rubio or a Ted Cruz to really gain traction despite not having the marquee name to begin. So really you need to wait for a couple of primaries to happen, and then that field will get thinned. And I think you'll see some alternatives to just the big marquee names.
So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. One is, if you get to choose the Republican nominee, who's that going to be from your personal beliefs?
Yeah.
The second one is, who has the best chance of actually winning?
Wow, you know, here I say you can't say anything bad about Ben Carson, and so I'm gonna fudge a little bit. It'd be Ben Carson or Rand Paul for me if I could choose the next president. Both I identify with so much of their positions, but Rand Paul very much on some of the more freedom and libertarian-oriented positions, though he's a bit different from me on international affairs, but in the military. But and then the second part was who do I think's going to
who most likely at this point would win?
Would win. I think the best ticket that the Republican Party, if the Republican Party puts this ticket together, it will win certainly. Scott Walker and Marco Rubio, because
that's the ticket.
Rubio will pull Florida, Walker will win Ohio and Wisconsin, and it's game over.
All right. All right. Well, we'll keep a close eye on it. Before we leave this topic, is Trump helping or hurting the Republican Party with what he's doing?
Yeah, good question. I think what he's doing is he's helping the Republican Party find its soul a little bit from the standpoint of he's not allowing people to dodge any issues. So the Republican Party is going to talk about immigration reform. He's going to force them to. Now, it might be very uncomfortable, like ripping off a Band-Aid or something, but it's going to get done. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna bring you back on the show after all this is done, and we'll see if that ticket gets chosen and if it is a guaranteed win, as you predict.
Hey, I'd like to see Rand Paul and Ben Carson or flip-flop that. You know, I mean, that'd be cool for me, but I don't always get what I want.
Okay, so let's jump into your forte, financial advising, and Can you kind of give us an overview of what's going on right now in that arena? I mean, are you seeing just amazing, prosperous times that are very optimistic, or are you having to be cautious in some areas? I know it's always kind of a mix, but what's going on out there?
Yeah, well, we had some, in real GDP terms, we had some economic contraction in the second quarter, or anticipated anyway that we could have it in the second quarter when those numbers come out. So, you know, earlier in the year, we were overweighting small-sized companies and mid-sized companies because the U.S. economic engine was roaring. So now we actually have seen this month small and mid-sized stocks underperform large cap stocks. And I think there's two things going on there. One, the rise in the dollar has kind of abated, which was hurting large cap stocks, and the U.S. economy perhaps is being, at least the markets are forecasting that it thinks that the economy is going to slow down a little bit. So the small and mid-sized companies have underperformed a little bit this month. So I think we're seeing a little bit of an inflection point in the U.S. economy. At least the markets are trying to feel that out. You know, globally, we like European stocks because the European Central Bank is going to print about another trillion euros between now and September of next year. So that money tends to find its way into international assets, into financial assets. So we like European stocks. But, you know, the Greece thing flared up and caused volatility to rise and presented a lot of opportunities that we've profited from in this month. But going forward from here, volatility probably will remain relatively low in the stock markets, which is odd for the third quarter. I just don't see some, you know, catalysts that could really frighten the markets. But the Fed may raise rates here in September, something like that. I don't think that'll spook the markets because I think the markets expect it, and I don't think it'll slow the economy down really. But those numbers are still developing. All in all, I think we probably, if we do see 2 quarters back to back of contraction, that's officially a recession, but it should be very mild. I mean, when we look across the globe, we still are a real strong engine of growth in the developed economies anyway, relative.
So we went through the Great Recession after the housing market collapse, and it seems like we're clawing our way out of that. Do you have any idea or prediction of whether we might see a recession in the coming years?
Yeah, the real catalyst for recessionary, kind of another Great Recession type of event, I think would be a surprising rise in interest rates. And so one thing that's on our radar screen is trade surpluses that we have with China. When China runs trade surpluses with us, they have to recycle those dollars back in the U.S. and they buy treasuries, and it helps keep our interest rates low. And that's been going on for years, and eventually that trade gets really crowded, and when a crowded trade reverses itself, it can move very quickly. So we have to be, we're always conscious of how will interest rates rise, and will they rise very quickly. And if they rise in an expected fashion, it shouldn't throw the economy into anything more than just a mild recession. But if they were to rise very rapidly, then that could be a devastating situation, like a type of a Great Recession kind of scenario. If you go down the path of, well, can we print money forever? I mean, that's kind of nonsensical, right? No country's ever done that indefinitely, debase their currency and survive. Ultimately, you could have a currency crisis if that trade I spoke of unwinds itself so quickly that the rest of the world who's sitting on dollar reserves decides they don't want their dollar reserves anymore. They sell their treasuries and send it all home, and all the inflation we've exported for decades comes home to roost, and then you get your Social Security check and it can just buy you a cup of coffee because your dollar's not worth anything.
It's just, how on earth can we continue to print so much money and not have negative consequences?
The only way we can do it is so long as the rest of the world will accept it, because we run trade deficits. So long as they will run surpluses with us and recycle those dollars back here and buy our financial assets. And there's just no telling how long that goes on. It's been going on really since the early 80s, and now could it go on another 30 or 40 years? It's possible. I think really what brings it home will be the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare, and that's kind of a tipping point where international lenders to us identify, hey, there's no way your economy is going to actually pay this back with meaningful dollars. You're just going to run the printing presses and pay us back with toilet paper that looks, has George Washington's face on it. So that's what we're always watching: rates, trade numbers, and
low interest rates they've been kept low for quite some time now. There's talk that the Fed may raise them. What would that do? You said if it was expected, maybe not as much, but why is low interest important?
Yeah, cost of capital for businesses. So, if you've got cost of capital for a company very low, they don't need to have quite as high a return on equity in order for their stock price to be up, for example. And as their cost of capital goes up, that return on equity will have to go up commensurately. If that doesn't happen, then stock prices fall. People feel less wealthy. They don't consume as much when they feel less wealthy, and so you can kind of get this downward spiral, of economic contraction. Keynesian economics is always about printing more money to keep that from happening, kind of what they call the wealth effect, make people feel wealthy. And then they'll keep consuming and spending. So eventually that works itself out. The real way to wealth is actual production and people working. Now what you see is an end result in a microcosm is Greece. Okay, when half the country is working for the government or on the dole and retiring at age 50 with 90% payout from pensions, I mean these people are going to live another 30 years making 90% of what they made. I mean eventually the half that's living off the other half, the half that's paying for it can't pay for it anymore, right? And it blows up. Like Margaret Thatcher said, socialism works it works until you run out of money, is what she said, paraphrasing.
So in the last minute that we have, what should people be keeping in mind as we move through this next year?
Yeah, when interest rates rise, the bonds in their portfolios will lose value. So bonds are not safe going into an environment that we've been speaking of in front. So you need to find some alternatives to that, and take it up with their advisor as to how do I insulate myself from a rising rate environment when this lowering rate environment the last 30 years unwinds and goes the other direction. And their advisor should have some answers for them on that.
All right. Well, as always, Cory, we appreciate your thoughts on all these different issues, and I hope we can check back in with you, as we get some answers to some of these questions. And I always like your predictions because we can come back and
we'll see how wrong I am
see
later.
how wrong or how right you are. But thanks again for giving us the time.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.